I am so glad you've decided to spend some time with this summary today. If you've ever felt like you're constantly running a race you can't win, trying to be the perfect professional, the perfect parent, or the perfect friend, then you are exactly where you need to be. We live in a world that often tells us we aren't enough. We aren't thin enough, successful enough, smart enough, or certain enough. We spend so much of our lives trying to meet these impossible standards that we lose sight of who we actually are. This is exactly what we're going to explore today as we dive into the core teachings of a truly transformative book. The main purpose of this work is to guide you toward what is called wholehearted living. This isn't a one-time destination or a box you check off a list. Instead, it is a way of engaging with the world from a place of worthiness. It's the deep-seated belief that no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, you are enough. It's about cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection needed to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what happens, I am worthy of love and belonging. To get us started, we're going to look at 3 high-level ideas that form the foundation of this journey. First, we have the concept of authenticity, the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we actually are. Second, we will look at the necessity of self-compassion, which involves learning to treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a dear friend. And third, we'll explore the importance of resilience, specifically how we develop the spirit to move through the inevitable struggles of life without losing our sense of self. Brené Brown developed these concepts through years of intensive research, and her goal is to provide us with a guidebook for the journey. It is about moving away from a life defined by what will people think and moving toward a life defined by I am enough. As we walk through these points together, I want you to consider how these ideas apply to your own daily rhythms. This isn't about finding a new you, but about reclaiming the real you that might be buried under layers of expectations. If you find this summary helpful and want to hear more deep dives into life-changing books, please take a moment to like this audio, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. Main summary: the journey to worthiness. The foundation of everything we are discussing today is the concept of wholehearted living. To understand this, we have to look at what it means to live from a place of worthiness. In the research presented in the book, worthiness doesn't have prerequisites. Many of us live with if/then or when/then conditions for our self-worth. We tell ourselves, I will be worthy of respect when I lose 20 pounds, or I will be worthy of love if I get that promotion. The book argues that these conditions are the primary obstacles to a fulfilling life. Wholehearted people don't have fewer struggles than the rest of us. They simply believe they are worthy of love and belonging right now, in the middle of the mess. This sense of belonging is a fundamental human need, but it can only happen when we present our authentic selves to the world. If we hide who we are to fit in, we might achieve fitting in, but we will never achieve true belonging, because the person being accepted isn't really us. Now we move to the next point, which explores the 3 essential tools for this journey: courage, compassion, and connection. These are not just feelings, they are daily practices. In the context of the book, courage is defined in its original sense from the Latin word cor, meaning heart. It refers to the courage to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. This is distinct from bravery, which is often about a single heroic act. This kind of courage is about being vulnerable and honest about our imperfections. Next is compassion. We often think of compassion as something we direct toward others, but the book emphasizes that we cannot be truly compassionate toward others if we are not kind to ourselves. If we are constantly judging our own flaws, we will inevitably judge the flaws of those around us. Finally, there is connection. This is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. Connection requires us to be willing to give and receive without judgment. These 3 tools work together to create a support system that allows us to navigate the guideposts of wholehearted living. Now we move to the next point, which addresses the primary barrier to these tools: perfectionism. The book makes a very clear and vital distinction between the healthy pursuit of excellence and the shield of perfectionism. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism, however, is other-focused. What will they think? It is described as a 20-ton shield that we lug around, thinking it will protect us from being hurt, blamed, or judged. But in reality, perfectionism prevents us from being seen. It is a form of cognitive behavioral armor. Because perfection is unattainable, we are constantly setting ourselves up for failure, which leads to shame and self-blame. To move toward worthiness, we have to trade perfectionism for self-compassion. This means acknowledging that being imperfect doesn't mean we are broken. It means we are human. By letting go of the need to be perfect, we open up the space to actually be good, creative, and connected. Now we move to the next point, which discusses the practice of authenticity and the people-pleasing trap. Authenticity is described as a choice we have to make every single day. It is the practice of letting go of the supposed version of ourselves. Most of us have a version of ourselves that we think is more marketable or likable to the world. We stay quiet when we want to speak up, or we say yes when we really mean no, because we are afraid of disappointing others. The book highlights that authenticity is often a lonely path initially because it requires us to set boundaries. Choosing to be authentic often means being willing to risk not being liked by everyone in exchange for being true to ourselves. It's the realization that our worth is not tied to how well we perform for others. When we stop trying to be who the world wants us to be, we finally have the energy to become who we actually are. Now we move to the next point, which explores the profound role of resilience and the way we handle the difficult emotion of shame. In our journey toward worthiness, we inevitably encounter setbacks. Resilience is our ability to bounce back from these moments, but the book teaches us that resilience is deeply tied to how we process shame. Shame is that powerful, painful feeling that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. It is different from guilt. Guilt says, "I did something bad," while shame says, "I am bad." The research shows that resilient people are those who can recognize shame when it's happening and move through it without letting it define them. This is important because shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. If we keep our struggles hidden, shame grows like a weed in the dark. However, when we speak our shame to someone who has earned the right to hear it, someone who can respond with empathy, shame begins to dissolve. Resilience, then, is about cultivating a resilient spirit, which often involves finding a sense of hope and a belief that we are not alone in our suffering. It's about understanding that our struggles are a part of the shared human experience, rather than a sign of our individual inadequacy. Now we move to the next point, which looks at the vital connection between gratitude and joy. Many of us think of joy as a spontaneous emotion that just happens to us, but the book presents a different perspective. Joy is actually something we must actively cultivate through the practice of gratitude. A key takeaway here is that gratitude is not just an internal feeling, it is a practice. It involves tangible actions, like keeping a journal or saying thanks out loud. The reason this is so important is that joy can actually be a very vulnerable emotion. Have you ever had a moment of pure happiness, perhaps looking at a sleeping child or celebrating a success, only to be immediately hit by a flash of what if something goes wrong? This is what the book calls foreboding joy. We try to dress rehearse tragedy to protect ourselves from being blindsided by pain. But the research suggests that the only way to truly experience joy is to lean into that vulnerability and practice gratitude in those moments. Instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop, we acknowledge the beauty of the present. By practicing gratitude, we build a foundation that allows us to fully inhabit our most joyful moments without fear. Now we move to the next point, where we examine the need to let go of certainty and instead cultivate intuition and faith. In a world that feels increasingly unpredictable, we often crave certainty. We want guarantees, data, and clear-cut answers before we make a move. However, the book argues that the need for certainty actually kills our intuition. Intuition is described not as a magical sixth sense, but as our ability to hold space for uncertainty and trust the many ways we've developed knowledge, including our gut feelings and past experiences. When we demand certainty, we often silence that inner voice. Closely linked to this is the concept of faith. In this context, faith isn't necessarily about a specific religion, but about a deep-seated belief in connection and a power greater than ourselves. It is the ability to let go of the need to control every outcome. This is important because life rarely gives us the certainty we crave. If we wait until we are 100% sure, we might never act. Learning to trust our intuition and have faith in the process allows us to navigate life's complexities with more grace and less anxiety. Now we move to the next point, which focuses on the necessity of creativity and the danger of comparison. The book makes a bold claim. There's no such thing as creative and non-creative people. There are only people who use their creativity and people who don't. Our creativity is a unique expression of who we are, and when we don't use it, it doesn't just go away. It metastasizes. It turns into resentment, grief, or even physical illness. The primary enemy of creativity is comparison. We spend so much time looking at what everyone else is doing that we stifle our own original voices. Comparison is about conformity and competition. It tells us we should be doing what everyone else is doing, but better. This is why creativity is such an essential gift of imperfection. It requires us to stop trying to be the best or the same, and instead focus on being the only. When we create, whether through cooking, writing, gardening, or problem solving, we are practicing authenticity. We are putting something into the world that wasn't there before, and that act itself reinforces our sense of worthiness. Now we move to the next point, which addresses our culture's obsession with productivity and the need for play and rest. In modern society, we often treat exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as a measure of self-worth. We feel guilty if we aren't doing something at all times. The book challenges this by stating that play and rest are not luxuries. They are biological necessities for a wholehearted life. Play is defined as doing something for no other reason than that it is fun. It has no goal, no ROI, and no productivity attached to it. When we stop playing, we lose our ability to innovate and empathize. Similarly, rest is often the first thing we sacrifice when we feel overwhelmed, but without it, we cannot be resilient or creative. The book suggests that deliberate rest and unstructured play are acts of rebellion against a culture that tells us our value is tied to our output. By choosing to rest and play, we are affirming that we are worthy of care simply because we exist, not because of what we achieve today. Now we move to the next point, which explores the practices of calm and stillness as a way to combat anxiety. Many of us live in a constant state of high-alert anxiety. We are wired and tired, constantly reacting to the next notification or the next crisis. The book differentiates between anxiety as a temporary emotion and anxiety as a lifestyle. To move toward a wholehearted life, we need to cultivate calm and stillness. Calm is not the absence of stress. It is the practice of creating space between a stimulus and our reaction. It's about being slow to respond rather than quick to react. This allows us to process information before we get swept up in panic. Stillness, on the other hand, is about quieting the internal chatter. It's not necessarily about sitting in a dark room for hours. It's about finding a quiet center within ourselves. This is important because when we are constantly moving and reacting, we lose our perspective. Stillness allows us to check in with our feelings and our values, ensuring that our actions are aligned with who we want to be, rather than just a reflexive response to the world's demands. Now we move to the next point, which explores the pursuit of meaningful work and the internal battle with self-doubt. A significant part of the journey toward a wholehearted life involves finding and engaging in work that feels meaningful to us. The book suggests that we all have unique gifts and talents that we are meant to share with the world. When we don't use these gifts, we feel a sense of emptiness or frustration. However, the path to meaningful work is often blocked by self-doubt, those gremlins in our heads that ask, "Who do you think you are?" Or, "What makes you think you can do this?" We often stay in safe or supposed to careers because we are afraid of failing or being judged. But the research shows that meaningful work isn't necessarily about a specific job title or a paycheck. It's about alignment. It's about ensuring that how we spend our time and energy reflects our values and uses our natural strengths. Overcoming self-doubt requires us to recognize that our worth is not tied to our productivity, but our contribution is vital to our well-being. By choosing to honor our gifts, even in small ways, we begin to bridge the gap between who we are and what we do. Now we move to the next point, which addresses the liberating practices of laughter, song, and dance as a way of letting go of being cool and always in control. In our adult lives, we often develop a layer of armor that the book describes as the need to be cool or the need to stay in control. We worry about looking silly, being perceived as unprofessional, or losing our dignity. Because of this, we often suppress the very things that bring us deep, spontaneous connection: laughter, singing, and dancing. These are described as universal human experiences that bond us together. When we laugh until we cry, or when we sing loudly in the car, or when we dance without worrying about how we look, we are practicing a form of vulnerability. We are letting our guard down and allowing ourselves to be seen in a raw, unpolished state. The book teaches us that being cool is actually a form of self-protection that keeps people at a distance. By choosing to embrace these joyful, often unproductive activities, we reclaim a sense of freedom and playfulness that is essential for a wholehearted life. Now we move to the next point, where we dive deeper into the 3 elements of self-compassion that serve as the antidote to shame. Building on the earlier discussion of compassion, the book references the work of researcher Kristen Neff to break down self-compassion into 3 specific practices. The first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. This is the practice of being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. The second is common humanity versus isolation. This is the recognition that suffering and personal inadequacy are part of the shared human experience, something that we all go through, rather than being something that happens to just me. This shift in perspective is vital because shame thrives on the idea that we are uniquely broken. The third element is mindfulness versus over-identification. This involves taking a balanced approach to our negative emotions so that feelings are neither suppressed nor exaggerated. We observe our thoughts and feelings with openness and clarity, without getting swept up in a story about our worth. These 3 elements together provide a practical framework for treating ourselves with the same grace we so readily offer to others. Now we move to the next point, which introduces the DIG way of living as a practical tool for daily challenges. When the concepts of courage, compassion, and connection feel overwhelming or out of reach, the book offers a simple acronym to help us dig deep: DIG. The D stands for being deliberate. This means intentionally choosing our thoughts and actions rather than reacting out of habit or fear. It's the conscious decision to practice the guideposts we've discussed. The I stands for being inspired. This involves seeking out stories, people, or practices that remind us of our worth and keep us motivated on the journey. It's about filling our well, so we have something to draw from when things get difficult. Finally, the G stands for getting going. This is the realization that wholehearted living is a practice, not a destination. It's about taking action, even when we don't feel ready or perfect. The DIG practice is a way to ground ourselves in the present moment and move forward with intention, especially when the old patterns of perfectionism and shame try to pull us back. Now we move to the next point, which examines the concept of the gap and the importance of practicing our values. A central theme in the book is the difference between professed values and practiced values. We all have a list of things we say we value, things like family, health, creativity, or honesty. However, the gap is the space between those stated values and how we actually live our lives day to day. For example, we might say we value rest, but then spend our weekends working and feeling guilty for sitting down. The book argues that this gap is where a lot of our discontent and shame live. To live wholeheartedly, we have to narrow that gap by turning our values into actual behaviors. This requires a high level of self-awareness and the courage to make choices that might be unpopular or uncomfortable. It's about recognizing that our values are not just ideals to be admired, but filters through which we make every decision. Closing the gap is an ongoing process of alignment that reinforces our sense of integrity and self-trust. Now we move to the next point, which explores the relationship between vulnerability and power. One of the most significant misconceptions the book addresses is the idea that vulnerability is a weakness. In our culture, we are often taught that being vulnerable means being exposed or unprotected. However, The research reveals that vulnerability is actually the most accurate measure of courage. It is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, and creativity. Without vulnerability, we cannot truly connect with others because we are always keeping a part of ourselves hidden. The book clarifies that vulnerability is not about oversharing or letting it all hang out with everyone we meet. Rather, it is about sharing our feelings and experiences with people who have earned the right to hear them. It is the willingness to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome. By embracing vulnerability, we tap into a source of inner power that doesn't rely on being perfect or bulletproof, but on being real. Now we move to the next point, which discusses the surprising relationship between boundaries and compassion. One of the most counterintuitive findings in the research is that the most compassionate people are often the most boundaried. We often think of compassion as a soft, limitless quality, a willingness to say yes to everyone and everything. However, the book teaches us that we cannot truly be compassionate toward others if we allow them to walk all over us or if we fail to hold them accountable for their behaviors. When we don't set boundaries, we eventually become resentful, and resentment is the enemy of compassion. By clearly defining what is okay and what is not okay, we protect our own well-being and, in turn, become more capable of offering genuine kindness to others. Compassion is not about being a doormat. It is about recognizing our shared humanity while maintaining the integrity of our own space and needs. Now we move to the next point, where we explore the definition of hope as a way of thinking, rather than just a feeling. The book challenges the common idea that hope is a warm, fuzzy emotion that we either have or we don't. Instead, it presents hope as a cognitive process, a way of thinking that can be learned and practiced. Drawing on research, it breaks hope down into 3 parts: goals, pathways, and agency. This means that hopeful people have a specific destination in mind: goals. They are able to figure out multiple ways to get there, pathways, and they believe in their own ability to do the work required: agency. This perspective is vital because it shifts hope from something passive to something active. It reminds us that even when things are difficult, we have the power to navigate our way through by breaking down our challenges into manageable steps and maintaining a sense of personal power. Now we move to the next point, which looks at the physical and emotional warning signs of shame. Since shame is such a destructive force in our journey toward worthiness, the book emphasizes the importance of recognizing how it manifests in our bodies and minds. Shame often has physical tells: a tightening in the chest, a dry mouth, or a sudden urge to hide or disappear. By becoming aware of these physical sensations, we can catch a shame spiral before it gains too much momentum. Emotionally, shame often sounds like a critical inner voice that uses words like never or always. For instance, I'll never be good enough, or I always mess things up. Learning to identify these warning signs allows us to pause and practice shame resilience. Instead of reacting defensively or lashing out, we can acknowledge the feeling, breathe through it, and reach out for connection, which is the ultimate antidote to shame. Now we move to the next point, which delves into the sacredness of the ordinary and how we often overlook the true sources of joy. In a culture that celebrates the extraordinary, the huge successes, the viral moments, and the grand achievements, we often lose sight of the beauty found in everyday life. The book argues that wholehearted people find their greatest joy in ordinary moments: a quiet cup of coffee, a walk in the park, or a simple conversation with a loved one. We often chase the big things, thinking they will finally make us happy, only to find that the joy they bring is fleeting. By practicing gratitude for the ordinary, we build a life that feels rich and meaningful on a daily basis, rather than just on special occasions. This perspective encourages us to slow down and truly inhabit our lives as they are happening, rather than constantly looking toward the next big thing on the horizon. Now we move to the next point, which addresses the importance of finding a sense of purpose through our unique contributions. While we previously touched on meaningful work, the book expands this to include a broader sense of purpose that transcends our job titles. This involves identifying the specific gifts and talents that make us who we are and finding ways to express them in the world. When we contribute our unique song or dance to the community, we feel a deep sense of belonging and value. Purpose is not something we find, as much as it is something we create through our daily choices and actions. It's about asking ourselves what we have to offer that no one else can. By focusing on contribution rather than just consumption or competition, we align ourselves with the larger sense of meaning that sustains us through the inevitable ups and downs of life. Now we move to the next point, which explores the role of spiritual connection in a wholehearted life. The research presented in the book suggests that a sense of spiritual connection is a common thread among those who live from a place of worthiness. Again, this is not necessarily about organized religion, although it can be. Instead, it is defined as a deep-seated belief that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than ourselves, a power grounded in love and compassion. This spiritual connection provides a sense of perspective and reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. It offers a soft place to land when things get difficult and provides a framework for understanding our shared human journey. For many, this connection is nurtured through nature, meditation, community, or creative expression, and it serves as a vital anchor in the pursuit of a wholehearted life. As we bring this exploration to a close, it is helpful to look back at the path we've traveled through these guideposts. We've learned that living a wholehearted life isn't about reaching a state of perfection where we finally have everything figured out. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It is about the daily, often messy practice of showing up as our authentic selves. The book reminds us that the gifts of imperfection, courage, compassion, and connection are only accessible to us when we stop trying to hide our flaws and start embracing them as part of our story. Throughout our discussion, a recurring theme has been the idea of choice. We choose authenticity over perfectionism. We choose self-compassion over self-judgment. We choose gratitude over fear. These aren't choices we make once. They are decisions we face every single morning when we wake up and every night before we go to sleep. The journey toward worthiness is not a straight line. It is a spiral that requires us to return to these practices over and over again. There will be days when shame feels loud and perfectionism feels like a safe shield. But the research shows that the more we practice these guideposts, the more resilient our spirit becomes. One of the most powerful takeaways from this work is the simple yet profound declaration: I am enough. This isn't a statement of achievement, but a statement of existence. It means that your worth is not a variable that changes based on your productivity, your weight, your bank account, or the opinions of others. You are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are right now. By letting go of who you think you are supposed to be, you give yourself the greatest gift possible: the freedom to be who you actually are. The practices we've discussed, cultivating creativity, making time for rest and play, leaning into intuition, and choosing calm over anxiety, are the building blocks of a life that feels vibrant and meaningful. They allow us to navigate the hardships of life without losing our sense of self. They help us build deeper, more honest connections with the people around us. And perhaps most importantly, they allow us to experience true joy, not because our lives are perfect, but because we are fully present for them. As you move forward from this summary, I encourage you to pick just one of these guideposts to focus on this week. Perhaps it's practicing a moment of gratitude when you feel foreboding joy. Or maybe it's choosing to say no to a request that doesn't align with your values so you can protect your time for rest. Remember that wholehearted living is a long-form journey. It is about the small, quiet moments of courage that eventually add up to a life lived with heart. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the core concepts of this transformative work. By taking the time to listen and reflect, you are already practicing the courage and curiosity needed to live a more authentic life. May you find the strength to embrace your imperfections and the wisdom to recognize the many gifts they bring into your world.